All right, my mathletes, here we go with our third and final installment of using trig identities. Part 3, where we're going to take a look at secant, cosecant, and cotangent. All right, so again, make sure we got that unit circle around us because we are going to be using that something fierce. All right, now, just quick review. Remember the unit circle? X and Y coordinates are your cosine and sine, and tangent are going to be the sine divided by the cosine, or the red values around here that I've got around the unit circle. Right? Now, when we go ahead and take a look at this, these values, so I'm going to just kind of work with these and just kind of review the reciprocal identities. Sine and cosecant go together. Cosine is the reciprocal of secant and vice versa. And then tangent is the reciprocal of cotangent, which means tangent is 1 over the cotangent and cotangent is 1 over tangent. Later on, when we work with solving trig equations, one of the things, and when we work with some of the identities there, we'll be looking at some other trig identities, and you might have to work something like sine squared, but know that sine squared, you could replace that with 1 over cosecant squared, or similarly, cosecant squared. It would be the same thing as 1 over sine squared, but that is for later. We're not doing that just yet. All right, so we will get rid of those. You don't need to know those just yet. But again, these reciprocal values around the unit circle, make sure you have those memorized because that is going to be key as we take a look at these next problems. And then, so here with problem number 7, 8, and 9 on these guys, and then 10, 11, and 12. Again, we're just hunting around the unit circle for these values. But we've got to know which function is the reciprocal for that. So if I take a look at cosecant of 315 in my brain, so the way my brain works on this for number 7, right, I've got to think cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So first I think of what's the sine of 315. All right, and then when I locate where 315 is on the unit circle, then I have to remember the sine is the y coordinate. So for 315 degrees, the y coordinate is negative root 2 over 2. Right? So that's kind of what my brain is thinking. Then my brain has to go to another step where I'm like, oh, cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So the reciprocal of negative root 2 over 2 would just be negative square root of 2. Now the negative sign stays with it because when you do the reciprocals, the positive or negative sign stays with that value. So that's always going to be one of the pieces too to kind of pay attention to as well. So the reciprocal of negative root 2 over 2 is just negative square root of 2. And again, if you wanted to do that out the long way and take negative square root of 2 over 2 and change that so you can multiply that, or that would be when you take the reciprocal, then you would end up with 2 on top and square root of 2 on the bottom with that. And then you're going to have to multiply by negative square root of 2 over negative square root of 2. Or positive square root of 2 over square root of 2, sorry. And then when that happens, then you end up with all the rationalizing and then canceling and everything. So you end up with just negative 2 square roots of 2 over 2. And then the 2's cancel out, boom, boom. And then so finally you're left with negative square root of 2. So that's going to be, having these values memorized over here from before, that's going to be really cool to be able to have that. And if this value is negative, that means your answer is going to be negative. So if you had negative square root of 3 over 2, its reciprocal would be negative 2 square roots of 3 over 3. So those are all critical parts to make sure that you've got down. Now when we look at secant of 120, again, secant, when I'm thinking about secant, that is going to be the reciprocal of cosine. And the reciprocal of cosine, so in my brain, again, it just kind of depends how your brain sees it. But my brain, for number 8, first says, well, what's the cosine of 120? Cosine is the x-coordinate. So then I look on the unit circle for the x-coordinate at 120. And at 120, the x-coordinate is just negative 1/2. So I know that's negative 1/2. So if I take the reciprocal of that, well, no big deal. I get negative 2. And then lastly, let's try this cotangent of 135 degrees. So again, you look on the unit circle, you find 135 degrees, and then we're going to look at the tangent value. So the tangent, again, y divided by x, or you can look at the red values that are around the outside here. And the cotangent of 135 will be the reciprocal of the tangent of 135. And the tangent of 135 is just plain old negative 1. And ironically, if you have 1 as a value or negative 1 as a value, the reciprocal is going to be the same thing. So negative 1's reciprocal is still just plain old negative 1. Nothing to do there. All right, and then we have cosecant of pi. All right, so let's take a look at cosecant of pi. Again, for number 10 here, I'm kind of thinking cosecant of pi. Cosecant goes with the sine value. So if I look at pi, the y value is going to be 0. And the reciprocal of 0, well, there is no reciprocal of 0. That is a number. So that value, we would say, is undefined. And if you think about that, if you had something was equal to 0, then when you take its reciprocal, you'd have 0 on the bottom, and you can't have 0 on the bottom. That's undefined, bro. So that's why cosecant of pi would be undefined. And then let's take a look at 4 pi over 3. So 4 pi over 3, locate that on the unit circle. And that's where you have the coordinates -1/2 and -√3 over 2. And from here, if I want the secant, that means I'm looking at the cosine value. The cosine value is -1/2. And then I take the reciprocal of -1/2, and that would just be -2. So there's a lot of thought process that goes into secant, cosecant, cotangent. There's just one more step, because in addition to locating the value, then you got to do the reciprocal of it. Now 3 pi over 2, so here's another one. 3 pi over 2, it has the coordinates 0 and -1 at 207 degrees, or 3 pi over 2. I want cotangent, so if I look at the tangent of that, the tangent of that is undefined. The tangent of that is undefined. Now, I could just have it memorized that cotangent is going to be the reciprocal of undefined, which would be 0. Or I could also take a look at it, from the perspective that tangent is the same thing as the y-coordinate over the x-coordinate, which means the cotangent would be the x-coordinate over the y-coordinate. And if I look at the xy coordinates at 3 pi over 2, or 270 degrees, those coordinates are 0, -1. So the x-coordinate would be 0, and the y-coordinate would be -1. So 0 divided by -1, still 0, bro. All right, so that is it for trig values around the unit circle, finding those and using those trig values. So hopefully you're going to be able to knock those values out. It's going to take some practice, and I know a lot of students, depending on what school you're at, a lot of teachers will give you 12-minute drills where you've got to do these in both degrees and radians and be super quick with doing that. So just think about it like the times tables, the time test that you maybe did in elementary school. To be able to do that quickly and easily, it's going to take some time and some practice, and I know you guys will knock it out of the park. But that's it for this video, and that's a wrap on this section. So I'll catch up with you guys later on. Make it a great day. Peace out.